Hello, and welcome to all of my beloved soul sisters. Thank you for joining me here today on the Heart of the Soul podcast. My name is Amana, and I'm so happy that you're here. This is a space where we explore what it means to be wild women walking upon this earth. We connect through the ancient ritual of storytelling, sharing about that which is often unseen and unspoken. It's my hope that soaking in these stories may inspire you to harness your own innate knowing and center you into a more embodied and alive version of your beautiful, unique self. Today is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. I'm currently in Chattaroy, Washington, in the Pacific Northwest of the US. It is snowy out there behind me, as you might be able to see. Our moon is in the waxing half moon phase in Taurus, building towards our next full moon on Wednesday, the 12th. And in this episode today, I am speaking to Akilah S Richards. And when she and I got on, we just pressed record and started without my normal intro with the guest. So I'm going to send it to that. Enjoy. It's a beautiful, beautiful episode where we talk about unschooling, the soul, birth, death, grief tending, all sorts of fun, juicy, good stuff. So I hope that you enjoy this episode and let me know what you took away from it. And stay tuned at the end. Right when I got done recording with her, I hopped on and just showed you her book and then did a little 3-card pull from her Raising Free People deck. And stay tuned for that because it was a good one. Hope you enjoy. Yay. I am so excited to be here with you in this real time. I have been for me, like we were saying, it might have been around, 2020, 2021.
2021, I think so.
I think it was Amber's podcast where I heard your voice. And I know that, voices are as unique as like our fingerprints and things. I heard your voice and I felt this incredible resonance and I had to hear more. And I found your podcast and your book and just started soaking you in, and you gave me all sorts of like new language and ways to describe sort of what I was experiencing and leaning into, but I didn't have the words to make it more like tangible and real. And I'm so grateful for you for that.
You are so welcome. And shout out to Amber. That was such a great conversation. And I got some awesome castor oil. She gifted me something lovely. And I still listen to her podcast, Medicine Stories, I think it's called. Yeah, I've listened to some episodes relatively recently and really love the work she's doing in the world. So I love knowing that that's how we flowed through. And as I was saying to you, thank you so much for being part of my Make It Happen family, because the work I do in the world, which is so much about languaging, as much as I go in and out of resisting and embracing that, what you said is what I hear almost always. And I'm so grateful for that, because I know the power of being able to name something and also to hear what you're experiencing, like in a fog in some ways, reflected, can be so all the things. So I really take that in with such gratitude and appreciation for what comes through me, and also the people, because thank you for being part of this space, because ain't no other way to do this kind of work. It's hella subversive. I'm not going to get a big grant to do the type of things I do. So all of the ways that people support my work, their energy, their dollars, their sharing, their feeling into, I deeply, deeply appreciate. Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you for all that you are putting out into the world in so many different ways and forms. Your writing, your videos, your podcast that you did. And it just, for me, it gave me so many different ways to like soak in who you are. And like I said, the language that you use. And I'm so curious, like, were you someone who, like, from a young age, were you into words and language and creating different ways of talking about things?
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Yes. I've shared this so many times, because I even find it interesting. I'm a firstborn, and also in the little community that I was in a part of Jamaica, in a parish called St. Catherine, in a little place called Passage Fort. I was one of the first littles, you know, and like, or the other ones were just like older and had moved. For somehow I came through in a time when I was just kind of one of the few littles, especially on our block of maybe 8 or 9 houses.
Mhm.
So, I think that because I was mostly around grown-ups, how the languaging works. And so my mom and uncles, her brothers and aunt, her sisters say that I started school at 2. There was a little, we call it a basic school, and they sent me there because it's like, well, what else are we gonna teach you here? You're doing the talking, you're doing the things. And from 2 to about 6, because my mom, no, maybe about 5, because my mom left Jamaica when I was about 5. They would in the evenings put me on the little stoop. So we had a gate, you know how you have the 2 columns that the gate iron goes into, and they would put me there in the evening, and I would tell stories. Like I would just make up stories and tell the stories, and people would finish their job and leave the bus stop and come around to hear my stories, apparently. And even some of my mom's friends now, when we reconnect, they're like, "Do you remember your stories, Keela?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I do not," but that's really interesting. So I like to, and also being maybe 7, 8, 9, I remember I started journaling just for myself because I understood that there was a world in my head, and that when I wrote, I could not only see it, but learn about it. Like sometimes I wrote something down that it feels like I didn't think it, but apparently it was it. So I just really early on was curious about seeing more of whatever was in here. And I knew that it wasn't just all, well, I didn't have the language of like my conscious and my subconscious, but I knew that there were other things that I could find out about through writing it down, through writing. Yeah. And then more recently, over the past maybe 5 years, it's also been my voice. So I do voice journaling, and I'll hear how I said something when I listen back to it, and it'll clue me into something else, like that. Or I'll be talking to somebody and I'm like, wait, how, yeah. So that's kind of the origins that happened. And throughout grade school, I was good at words. I did not like math, loved English, that sort of thing, wrote all the essays. As I got older and folks died, I would be the one that would like, help me write the eulogy. And so yeah, so words have always, they like me, and they want me to like lead them and take them places. And I'm like, all right, let's go.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's been an honor to witness you like over these years, because when I first found you, you were focused on unschooling and, schoolishness and
Yeah.
you these beautiful terms, and then into this savorist practice. And then now like grief feels like a big, thing in your forefront right now. And
Mhm.
I I love it because I've been in the world of grief for many. Well, my first like big experience with death and grief was when I was 25, and I'm 42 now. And so at 25, my first love died, and I just was like initiated into the realm of grief and death and all the things. And then I, grew up, and then my first baby died right after she was born. So it was another like big, I had initially thought, oh yeah, universe, like that was my one big death of my life, and then there won't be any more. And then my daughter came along, and I had her grief process to deal with. And then I became a palliative care nurse and worked a lot with people in death and dying and grief work now with other moms. And so I have just been so excited and soaking in your grief work, because it's again like you're giving like life and language to these things that we really need, this like culture around death and dying and grieving that we don't currently have active here in this space.
So real. Yeah, so real. When you shared that with me as we were emailing back and forth about the different ways that you've experienced loss and death and grief, I was like, look at that. I don't even it's like I I can't everywhere I turn, there is not just grief like subtle grief, but like experienced or often real time or anticipatory at level 10 grief. So I appreciate you sharing how why that moved you and your own personal experiences with it, because as you said, it's very much where I live now. Like I live here in this grief tending, grief literacy world. I A few years ago, someone who like you is just like the work that I do really is it connects them to their work in certain ways and just offers, just like how other people's work also does for me. It makes me feel like, oh, okay. Or sometimes it feels like a push, like go ahead. Or sometimes it's like it's okay to stop, so I don't take lightly what the work that I'm called to do invites. And one of the women who's been deeply impacted by my work offered me funding as a means of rest. It gave me some space to slow down, stop producing 8 million things to try to, make some money to cover the things to blah, blah, blah. And to just, you know,
Hmm.
and and one of the first things that I did when she offered that was something that I'd been longing to do since I was in college, which was seminary. I was really interested in going to seminary, but I couldn't find one that wasn't like Christian centered because I don't have a religion and I don't want one. And I didn't want to be trained to zoom in on a particular one. And of course, when the timing was right, things aligned, and I found this space that's in Manhattan and this interfaith, interspiritual seminary, One Spirit. And because of COVID, they were offering online, you could do the thing online, whereas before you couldn't.
Hmm.
So I went into that space because I wanted to be around other people who were like contemplative and um, wanting to really expand the experience of like what it means to be spiritually supported and also to support, you know? So I was able to dive into that. And about a year and change in, so I did a full year and then we did a summer intensive, which was in person. And towards the end of that intensive, I learned that the what I thought was a scholarship that was going to cover both years, so it was a lesser amount than the fee, it only covered a year. And I learned that then, and I was so upset and let it settle, and then realize what I always realize, that it's like I am so up to me. I am so entirely up to me. Like one of my mantras is I take full responsibility for the experience I'm having. And
Hmm.
so being after I was just like angry, it's like, all right, who do I talk to? I just roared for like a good bit. And then after it settled, it was like, bro, wait a minute. Okay. What's here? What's here? What's here? I saw that they also had an integrative thanatology program that really zoomed in on grief and loss and death and dying from this focus of like how these things are connected to everything. Actually, not just end of life. There's death everywhere. So I was able to afford that program. So I went in and it was so perfect for me, Amana, like everything I needed, the people there. I mean, my teachers. And so that's where I started to see that so much of what I was doing and experiencing and supporting and being called into in the unschooling world was really about a type of grief and loss and death of expectations and, shifting over into a new paradigm and the loss of community and all, they were really about losses, who you thought the child was going to be, who you thought you were going to be as a parent, what you thought learning was, like so much of it was like, oh, shit, we need ceremony for loss. Like, don't ask me shit about screens or math or whatever. We actually need to be in ceremony around what will never be and da 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 da. And so it just started to come together, and I can only follow what I'm interested in. I can never front and be like, okay, since the unschooling thing is working, like some parts of me feels like, oh my God, that would be so much better if I could do that, but I just can't. I gotta go, I gotta be where I'm at.
With the flow. Yes.
Yes, and it's the year of the snake, and I'm really like feeling into that this year.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so it really led me to zoom in on and spend time with the ways that I had already seen unprocessed, unnamed, untended grief as an unschooler, right? As people's mama, as people's daughter,
Mm.
as people's life partner, all these ways. And so I just followed that. And I started volunteering, which I still do at a local hospice. And I found the bereavement coordinator for this one is a Black woman, which is great because, as you may know, in that world, it's like it's so like kind of whitewashed broadly. The language, the practices, the borrowing of aspects of other cultures without appropriately naming and offering, getting consent, all these things. Um, that come with a type of pervasive whiteness in terms of culture. So I landed in a space where there's this incredible Black woman who really holds the grief and bereavement work for this hospice system that is in all these various parts of Metro Atlanta. And
Mm.
and so to, as you know, like to be in that space where people are dealing with physical death, and the aftermath of that, because she works with people for a year after their loved one dies. And then I'm also volunteering with the Atlanta Regional Commission, where they do work with the aging and to really move away from this like anti-aging culture, also in this aging gracefully culture, over into just aging. Like, what do I
Yeah.
need to know? What do I need for my body coming so it just feels, I'm so immersed in it. And I started doing grief circles in my family of origin.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, and then just broadened it bit by bit by bit. And now I'm doing it in other places. And then I launched my course, I Let It Die, the I Let Grief course. And we've done 2 rounds of that over the years. And they are like multi-month long, just kind of slow walks, just savoring into our grief tending. And so that's where we meet each other now, where I am just the same way that unschooling was a portal for like unraveling and displacement, really. So that's what this is too. Like it isn't a coming together, it's actually displacement. So that whatever needs to happen when you come out of the thing you thought was all together can happen. So it feels for like a continuation to me. And I'm just surrendered to it. I'm all up in it. I'm just floating
Mm.
in the water,
Mhm.
learning. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I love that you bring up ceremony because ceremony or ritual for me has been like something that I didn't know about as a kid. Like I didn't grow up in any sort of religion or spirituality. Yet when I started experiencing these deaths, I found myself just naturally starting to create like a ritual practice of grieving or some sort of ceremony, whether it was just for me and, spirit or for other people that those a little, having little altars to my baby, like, and wearing a certain color or just like these things really helped me to grieve and process and move through and with what I was experiencing. And so I would love if you would maybe share a story or something about a ceremony or something to do with grief that you have either like been a part of as an experiencer or a facilitator, or like
Yeah.
where has that been for you?
Listen, easy, 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 low hanging fruit. Like there's so because it's all I'm into. I recently had, so we're recording this in like February, what's this? February.
February 5th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. So last month I had a conversation with Thea, Crystal, and Nikisha as part of the podcast as well, but she wasn't on that episode. The podcast is called Them Black Mamas, and they
Yes.
had an episode about Black motherhood and grief. And so I was part of that conversation, and in it, Crystal was sharing, and the episode is out now. It's episode 62. The conversation was just like every time I think about it, I just want to go somewhere and cry in like the best way. Crystal was sharing that her experience with grief is one that you basically try to like see how long you can manage it for. It's kind of like a hold your breath thing. She didn't say that up front, but it was that sort of thing. Her father died, and she was talking about just kind of that process and feeling like she doesn't have time for grief, which so much of us, it's like, listen, when am I going to be able to um, and so I was talking to her about this simple practice of scheduling time the same way we schedule time for this conversation, to schedule time to be with your grief. And like something might happen and it sets you off. Say it reminded her of her dad. Maybe she schedules some time on the 7th of February from 2 to 2:45 to look at a few photos of him, to listen to a couple of his favorite songs, to do whatever that thing is, to really treat it like a free dive where it's not about somebody throwing you into the water and you're trying to figure out how long you can hold your breath. You actually have gear. You have a little thing. You have options to go in. It's like a coral reef. You go in and you look into it, and then you come back up. You come back up when you're ready. And it's like grief likes structure. Grief itself does not have a structure, but it likes it. It's kind of like with unschoolers. People assume that as an unschooler, you're going to have to force your kid to do a thing. And it's like, it's not devoid of structure, bro. It's desire. It's not including forced structure. It includes your consent, and it trusts enoughness, right? As opposed to something predetermined. So similar thing with grief. It is vast. It is the entire ocean and the sky and the land and all the things. But you can put gear on. You can do things to put yourself in and come back out. So that one simple thing of just scheduling time like you would to go to the dentist or wherever to be with your grief, it allows you to go from, I like to use the language of, you're tenderized, something happens and it tenderizes you, right? So then when you're tenderized, what we do is we move over to our tendencies. When I am tenderized by a person, place, or thing, my tendency is to do this. But if you view yourself as an ever evolving grief tender, you can move from like grief stricken to grief tending. So you're tenderized, you notice your tendency, you feel into some ritual or simple thing. I collect stones. I've been doing it like all my life. So to talk to one, to put one into it, put it in your hand, talk, speak, put it away, like these simple things that we can do to go in and come out are we can do that for ourselves so that grief is what it is, which is a long-term partner, because the more life you have, the more grief you will have a chance to experience. And so if we know, which we do, that, with the gift of life comes the gift of death, and that as I learned, there's no bad death. That's one thing that I like to share. I think I shared that on Them Black Mamas too. I heard Wilka Roig, who was one of my teachers in thanatology school and just an incredible death literacy educator, Wilka Roig. She said that there's no such thing as a bad death, and I remember when she said it and I was so upset. Oh, I was like, ma'am, if you don't get, I was so like, And then as we continued, it's like, oh my God, I have to keep telling this story because she's right. There's no, the circumstances of a death can be horrific and sudden, but the reality is that death never said and life never said, look, the right way is when you're 99 and you're done and then you go. It happens shortly after birth. It happens before birth. It happens in ways that are not about a physical body. So my focus is a lot on non-body death because we don't, that type of grief isn't sanctioned. What are you upset about? Someone, at least you have life and breath, things like that that dismiss the other types of death that we experience. And so it just is like those are some of the things that come up when I think about like things that we can do. Everybody I feel has an inner ritualist. Through when we do the eyelid course, we identify things that people already do that they just didn't. It's like that's not ceremony because ceremony means this, this, and this, or ritual. I'm not witchy. I'm not, like versions of me have said that as well. But actually, it is accessible and it can be simple as breath, or as layered and complex as you need it to be. But you can do these things to tap into your tendency and to move over from your tendency, which for a lot of us is like, oh, God, over into be tender with myself, attend to the grief. What can I do in this moment to take a deeper breath? Because whatever that is actually enough for now. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that there can be a lot of like resistance to grief, and I've had it myself at times. I feel like a lot of that has to do with just not people not knowing how they can express it, not having it modeled to them. There's, and yet it's so necessary to grieve and move with it. And like you're saying, it's not just the death of a life of a human being, but I feel like for me, like the butterfly is this metaphor that we go through. I feel like we go through rebirthing processes throughout my life. I felt like I've gone through many metamorphoses
Right?
where I'm rebirthing, where I'm letting go of my old, starting anew, caring about what was
Yes.
with me. But yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And we know that, the especially in the US context, the so many things that were taken when we talk about a settler colonial way. And a part of that was absolutely the space and the respect for grieving and mourning, right? Both individual grieving and collective mourning. There just isn't space for that because capitalism, because all these things, because oppression of all kinds, because violence of all kinds. And yet here we are. So while these things were taken, we carry still with us and can bring both ancient and anew what is needed for the time that we're in, which is why I'm so like keen to do this work in this way. Part of me was like, I don't have all the credentials to do the thing. And people know me from this thing, my schoolish brain, because we can't escape it. We just learn to tame it. My schoolish mind was still wanting me to be something before I could do something or offer something. But because I'm both obedient and stubborn and I can hold multiple truths, it's like, you know what? For the people who are like, she's not credentialed, then don't come, boo. It's okay. But for someone who might, and who even are these people? They're probably all in my head. I don't know them. No one has said this to me. You know what I mean? So it's like you get to be with when you are obedient and stubborn, you can really get to be with what's possible. And like doing the eyelid course is really where I got to see like exactly what you said, like how far removed we are, but also like the words and the writing, how accessible it can be because we know we need it. We understand the costs of the absence of it to some degree. And that's why I talk about grief literacy, because for me, what I'm trying to live out is to bring more conversation about the diversity of grief and the access to grief tending. What you don't have to wait, you don't have to do something first, you don't have to constantly be afraid that if you face your grief, it's going to swallow you and you won't be able to do any of the things that you need to do, in your house, let alone in the world, right? It's like these are the things that we are unlearning. And so a big part of the work is, as I said, naming the non-body death. So in the course, we came up with a word. My grandmother actually gave it to me, my maternal grandmother, who is now an ancestor. The word is kananapo, Kananapo, kananapo. And I explained in the course that it's like a old school Jamaican patois word. And I grew up, as I told you, around a lot of my elders, especially like elders, not just my parents, more so than my parents. So some of my friends who are also Jamaican, they won't know a lot of the words that I know because they weren't raised by their grandma or grandpa and they didn't know it. But kananapo is one. And how my grandmother and like her siblings and stuff, how they used it is like they'd say, "Oh, Amana and I were supposed to meet, at 1 o'clock on Wednesday, and then I showed up, and then kananapo, you know, she's not there, don't know anything, and they usually do this with it too, which tells me it's like, oh, I don't see you, I'm not seeing kananapo." Um, so it's that, and it came to me because I was reading. Mm, Elua's amazing book, Briefly Perfectly Human. Yeah. By Elua author, this death doula, brilliant, brilliant woman. And she has a section in the book where she said there needs to be a name for basically non-body death. She's like from maiden to mother, from this to that. We have everything you said, butterfly all day, every day. Why isn't there a word? And I was like, there is a word. And then I kept feeling into it, and then it became kananapo. Mama gave me that word. So a part of what I'm for is to bring certain conversations into the world. I've been told this enough that I get it. And so that's a part of it, kananapo, to be able to offer that word to say when you are grieving and it is not directly connected to the death of a person, it is valid, it is worthy of your attention and care. You will need special things because you are experiencing it. And if it feels good, it's called kananapo. Like if it feels good to say that word, use the word kananapo because we need it. Yeah.
Yes, yes, thank you for that. I love language and words are so important. Kananapo. Yeah.
Yes.
For me,
Yeah.
like when my baby Hartley died, I felt like there wasn't a word for the way that I mother her. Like I still mother her in the spirit realm.
Yes.
Still there. And so I came up with the term that I was a mid-mother. Like that felt to me. I'm mid-mothering her. I don't mother her in the same way that I do my Earthside babes, but I am her mama and I continue to connect and mother her.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that with me. I love that so much. Um, I had, while Fear of the Free Child was alive, um, one of the women who I was in collaboration with to co-produce a season for Maori mothers in Aotearoa, which we call New Zealand. Um, Aisha was her name, is her name. Aisha and I talked about that. We had this series that I didn't publish on the podcast. I think I maybe just shared it in a newsletter. I don't even remember, but it was about like other mothering. And I had conversations with three women who had children who died,
Mhm.
who are very much still, they're still the mother of that child. And that child is still very present in their worlds. And so everything you said about not having like, society is just like, okay, the kid died, you got to move on and I love that Aisha and Tiffany, those are the two who shared their names, are women in my world who brought that education to me because Tiffany's daughter, So she's present in my world. Like I have art with her face on it because she comes to me and then I share it with Tiffany and she's like, what in the world? I mean, there are just so many ways. Her name is Abby. There's so many ways that Abby's presence defies any idea that we have about what it means to be alive and what it means to care for someone. I'm not even her mama. Right? So I feel like it's so important for us to play with words and to share these stories like mid-mothering. I find it so important that we offer, because these are offerings that we share from our most tender spaces so that someone else can love on that and use that to love on themselves too, because we need it. Because these things are not black and white, life or death. They are so many other things, and those things are true.
Yeah, you were also making me think about how sometimes when I've like made up a word or something like that, then people will be like, that's not a real word. I'm like, all the words have been made
All words
by
are made up.
somebody.
Thank you. And guess what I am? Somebody. So,
Exactly.
yeah, I say that all the time. It's like, please don't get me started. If you understand what I mean, and that unschooling taught me that. I need a t-shirt that says that unschooling taught me that because prior to really, really getting into being in partnership with Miley and Sage, I was known, especially in my family, as a grammar cop. Right. And for me, that was like a badge of honor because it's like, oh my God, that is not how that word is said, honey. This is blah, 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 blah. And it was like, not only was it schoolish, it was a type of schoolish that was like demeaning. And especially culturally, for me, it's like, what are you even doing? But we know why we feel like that. And then when we know better, we do better, right? So being around Marley and Sage, who both speak other languages, and watching them be in relationship with the culture that the language is from, as opposed to like isolating the language as if it doesn't belong to a culture. This is thinking that I learned from them. This is how I am learning Espanol, as I'm like being in relationship with its slow flow over time instead of the grammar. It's like the making up of the words, and the purpose of communication is shared meaning. So if you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to use the word that came from the thing. As a matter of fact, as I'm learning Spanish, it's like you basically talk like a toddler, right? You don't correct someone and don't ask to be corrected. Just try to communicate. It's so playful. It's so fun. It feels like I'm on a swing, like, and I'm controlling the movement of the swing. And sometimes I might jump out and be like, "Hola, cómo está? Muy bien," and then other times I'm like, "I'm just gonna stay." Aprendo español, porfa. Like you just, it's a whole different thing.
Yes.
And isn't that a part of what language is for? It's not meant to be like, you're from here, so you do this.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually meant to increase our opportunities to connect.
And understand.
And
And
yes, and even when we don't understand, to be able to trust connection even beyond understanding, because understanding can also be very much a tool of oppression. If I don't understand you, I don't feel safe. I don't get it, and right. So, like,
Mhm.
even understanding, we have to question because I may not understand. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And how can I be with that? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like that's why I love music. There's so many songs that I love that I don't know what they're saying,
Yeah.
but yes, I do. I don't understand, but I feel it.
Yes. Yes. I love one of the things that I've loved in my travels is the way that like music and dancing can unite people.
Oh,
I saw beautiful dances with people
yes.
that I couldn't communicate with through language, but we were having a wonderful, amazing
Exactly. And thank you for bringing up dancing because that's another thing I've been doing from, as we said, from my eyes were at my knees, from my eye to my knee. Like I am, my family thought I was going to be either a dancer or a lawyer. Those were the two things. Because everything you said about dance, even personally, like as I am approaching 50 and learning about this perimenopausal version, like as my body is going through these things, it's a whole different language. How I move, why I move is different. This isn't the same body in my 20s. This isn't the same body in my 30s. This isn't the same body in my early 40s. So dance and movement really helped me to learn my body's language, not my body language, my body's language, which actually is something that I need to stay in touch with because it isn't necessarily something that I always understand. I try to force it. I try to make it when my body is like, girl, stop.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking about like what I'm feeling more sure of now than I like have ever felt sure of before in my life. And right now,
Mm,
what I am feeling really sure about and something that I'm like dedicating some of my life to and just sharing is that for me that birth and death really matter. Like both of the like the beginning, the ending, birth and death, they matter so much.
yes.
And I also just feel like we have separated ourselves from birth and death. Like birth and death, not that many years ago, happened inside the home, and we would tend, like death, we would be tending to our people that were dying, whether they were young or old, and they would be dying in our
Yes.
homes. And my mom was actually birthed, like my grandmother, Elsie, she birthed my mom on these steps inside a house. They were getting ready to go to the hospital, but she came in call, like in the amniotic sac in the house, just, free birth in the home. And I am just really, I don't know. I feel like it's so important, the beginnings and the endings. And yes, of course, in the middle as well. But we have just I have felt separated from them as a like culture and the experiences. And yet, me living my life, I've really been leaning into what would it look like if that were different. And if we honored these huge, birth only happens once, that first breath only happens once in our lifetime,
Yes.
that last breath only happens once in our lifetime. I've been present for so many births and so many deaths. I can't even, I mean, I never thought that when I attended my first birth and death that I would not be able to recall in detail each one, but I'm at the point where now I cannot, but I can say that they all have this like palpable, real, like a very similar energy lives in the lands of birth and death. And
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And I love what you said about that they never happen again, right? There's such a sacredness for both of those. And I feel like, especially as I'm doing this work on aging, there's this way where it's like almost anti-death, right? That's why I love what I'm doing with this particular organization because they're not that. Because
Mhm.
most of it is like to stave it off, to try to look like it's not happening, to give these signals that something that is absolutely happening, we're dying, isn't happening. It's like a type of psychosis. Like it's mad. It's actually mad. So to be present to the reality that it is here, like they're both here all the time. And as you said, like we used to be born at home. I learned so much in thanatology school about caring for a body, once the person has died, all these things that I thought you had to do. I didn't even know that you could like not what's embalming. Like I didn't know that there were other ways to preserve a body with basically ice. Like these you could have the body at home for so long in simple ways with a basic death care kit, to support the processes. So those are some of the things in the eyelid course. I talk people through in great detail what happens when the body dies from right away to like 8 days, like to really like a simple thing like that so that we can stop the separation, the false separation. Because as you said, we are also experiencing life and death all the time. And nature is teacher and we are nature. So there's so many things that we don't know and don't get and are not tapped into specifically because we reduce birth and death to these like things that happen in a place with the right people, with the education for the thing. Like it's not even just about life and death. It is also about the in between because education lives in both of those places. Education that is masked, and like even when I think about the medical field, last year I spent the bulk of summer and fall zoomed in on hormones because I didn't understand what was happening to me. And so much of it is like this beautiful slowing down of the body in preparation for death, which also indicates ways that we can signal to the body, yes, I am in this woman body, and yes, I'm not doing these functional things anymore. I'm not going to have a baby, but here's some other things I can do to signal to these particular hormones that I still need them. How amazing is that? That there are other things that the body isn't just like betraying me and dying off. I just am not speaking the language that it has now evolved into in its beautiful, amazing self to carry me through to this other stage. That's death literacy that I'm able to use in life. And I don't believe that death is in service of life necessarily. Death is its own thing and it is for itself. And it doesn't necessarily mean that, because this thing died, another thing that I feel like that can be problematic because it doesn't give death its own space to be. Like it's not necessarily in service, it just is. We were promised it. And again, we might not understand that, but you can still value something that you don't have this amazing intellectual understanding of. So I'm so with you, Amana, that it's like those two things are so important. And I feel for me, it's very much about that aspect of not just accepting the reality and the beauty and the necessity of death, but specifically supporting. That's why it's called I Let It Die. Like there are some things that actually need to die or that are dead, but we, because we are unskilled, won't let it. Relationships of all kinds, right? Expectations and ideas, identities, roles, all these things that we are like, nah, my job, just like the medical industry, is to try to preserve the life. And if not to facilitate the death, that's bad, wrong, illegal. It's like, actually, we need these skills. We need these doula skills for so many other types of death. You're frozen, and I want to make sure that you can still hear me. Okay, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, like we can use these sort of doula skills for kananapo, right? And that's what we're doing. Okay, I'm getting a divorce, and I never ever thought that was going to happen in my entire life, and now my world is torn apart. We could do an autopsy. We can write eulogies. We can do temples and altars and services and ceremony for each stage of the process. It's not just about the legal thing and the conversation. There's another realm of support and processing and composting that lives in death literacy that we can use while we are alive and a bunch of shit is dying around us because it does all the time. And if we learn how to let it die and compost, that's that aspect of we know what composting does. It enriches, right? And not without muck and mud and smells and all the things, but it enriches. So I'm so with you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I am wondering if you would share with me what the word soul means to you.
Mm. Hmm. I like that question. Let me feel it for a second.
Hmm.
Soul. So, something that was really striking for me in the thanatology program was the way that they talked about using the word died instead of like lost. I lost my father, or just our aversion to the word death, which I brought up an important aspect of the cultural relevance of it because I know in different aspects of different Black cultures, we say that because of ancestry. We say it because we're saying they're not their energy and presence in our life hasn't died. It's just their body. And for short, we say lost or gone or transitioned. It isn't necessarily an aversion to saying the word dead, but it can be, right? So, one of the things that feel really solid for me is that the body dies. The body is absolutely a finite thing. It has a start date and an end date, as far as I know. You tell me if you know something different. But but the soul, the energies that animate the body is part of all. It's everywhere and everything. It's in bird song and breeze and shit and shiny stuff. And it is connected to all the things in ways that even my wordy ass can't name. And that is so when you said you heard my voice and it called you into a, that's because that was an aspect of my soul, right? That connected to an aspect of your soul and used your hearing because you have the benefit of that to bring it in so that your soul, right, can integrate it into this one, drop it in and be like, ah, it's like the body is like a location, like a site, and then the soul is everything else. That's how I view it. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank
What
you.
about for you?
Soul, yeah, similar. Okay, so it's a question I try to remember to ask in the podcast. I love it because people I've never had the same exact answer, and I probably being asked the same question wouldn't give the same exact answer
Same.
every time either.
Yeah.
But today, yeah, soul means to me it's yes, this palpable, energetic, like it's an energy form to me. It's like you said, it's not the body, that the body
Yeah.
and soul, the soul lives within the body. But to me, the soul also lives on when the body is no longer animate and doesn't have breath or life, that
Yeah.
soul continues, and I can still commune with souls of loved ones that are now ancestors that have passed on. And I feel the importance and also the connection, like you said, like just hearing your voice, I felt that connection and that need to hear more and come along with you and witness your journey along these last years.
Yes.
And it to me it explains also sometimes like when I met my husband, it was like this instant like soul connection the day that we met, and we like
Yeah.
the first questions we asked are like, are you married? Do you want to get married? Do you have kids? Do you want kids? All right, 2 weeks later he's asking me to marry him. It's like,
I love it. Yes, right. Yes, it's there it is again. I feel like one of the threads in our conversation, and I know we're coming to a close, one of the threads is the that sense of understanding, right? Because the stuff that he was saying to you and you were saying, most people are like, I don't understand. It's supposed to be this, this, and this, and this. I could say the same thing about Chris. We met in school and he's this quiet, to himself person. And for some reason, he was like, hi, talk, why? Right. And next
yeah,
thing you know, I'm like seeking him out in lunchtime. I'm like cheerleader doing all my things in the world. And I'm like, where is Chris? It's like there was some, and we didn't even date back then,
yeah,
anything like that. So it was just like savoring, the experience together. And then when we did get together, it was like, "Ah!" you know, because
yes,
it was
there's no
like, oh,
separating. It's like,
just like, oh my God, we just went 0 to 100 real quick. Babies, houses, the whole thing.
yes,
And I didn't even know that I wanted babies or to be somebody's wife or whatever. I wasn't feeling that. So
yeah,
it's just the soul knows. The
yes,
soul knows. And the brain might not, and the body, bless its heart. But the soul is a whole nother thing. Yeah. I'm glad
yeah,
we talked about this. I feel like I'm
yeah.
gonna sit with this for a second.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this time and space with me through the cosmos here.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, as we close, if you want to share with people, about your book or your cards, where they can
Ah,
find you and work with you.
yes. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, no, in one universe we were going to play with the cards
Yeah.
and stuff, but this felt exactly like, yeah. So I'm on two primary spaces now. The OG space is raisingfreepeople.com, right? So you can always go there and learn about the work that I've been doing in the world around like unschooling and that sort of soul work. And schoolishness.com. Thank you. You can also get Raising Free People there. My book that really talks about my personal journey and then my collective communal work into being and raising free people. Um, Shout out to Marley and Sage, my primary life guides who just like continue to teach me. They're such incredible humans. And then schoolishness.com. That's where you can order the deck and the book and sweatshirts with like Chris's art on it and all of that. Yes. And the deck and the book are available in English and in Espanol. Shout out to the people who organized to make those things happen. Oh my God. I cry every time I think about them. And then more recently, radicalselfie.org. That is, I call myself a groundskeeper, and those are my grounds. It has like a memorial site for the parts of me that have died. It has like kind of birthing space for what I'm moving into now, and lots of ceremony in between. So radicalselfie.org is free membership options, supportive membership options. That's where I'm at. And thank you so much for this conversation and for being part of my Make It Happen family for so long. I appreciate you. And I loved our conversation. Like I didn't even feel fidgety. Look at that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you, Amana.
Hey, Amana here. I just finished recording a podcast episode with Akilah S Richards, the author of this incredible, wonderful book. If you have kids in the colonized school system, or your kids are getting school age and you're feeling like, actually, I don't want to send them away from me for 30 plus hours every week, I highly, highly recommend this book. It's so wonderful. I have learned so much from this book. She also has a podcast, and that also has incredible insight information. It's also available on audiobook, but what I'm here for right now is to do a little bonus card pull for you all from her Raising Free People deck here, this practice deck. So I'm going to take these cards. I'm going to choose, I don't know, maybe 2, maybe 3, whatever is feeling good in the moment, and see what cards are showing up for you, my community, here at the end of this episode with Akilah S Richards. Okay. Reclaim. So I'm going to read the back here. It says, you still have time. It is not too late to do it now. Make the choice to allow yourself to feel through what it might look like for you to change something, starting now, as you are. How it has been ain't how it always has to be. Oh my gosh, so good. Okay, so what are you feeling? What is showing up for you? When I read this card, what is your mind going to? What is it that you have been wanting to start, wanting to do, wanting to change, and you haven't done it? And how can you make a tiny step towards doing it, changing it now? Because as she says, it ain't how it has been, ain't how it always has to be. Can you make that true? Love it. Okay. Another card here. Akilah, I'm feeling you. Maybe here is the doorway to whatever it is, this next step that you need to take. The doorway is whatever unraveling led you here. It's the deschooling path, the root causes behind the symptoms that drew you to explore it. There is a doorway. I feel like this is calling me, calling you to reclaim the thing, the dream that you have lost, not focused on, not moved towards, and walk through that open doorway towards possibility. Take that next little step. What do you think? Should we draw one more? I'm going to draw one more. To close us out here with this deck. Definition. Ooh, love this. Akilah and I talked about words, the definitions of words, making up new words because somebody made up the words that we already have. And so, yeah, that's in this episode that you would have just listened to. But the definition is however you would describe the details of a comfortable living environment where learning and life are not siloed into separate boxes. So here she's talking about unschooling specifically, but I also feel like this is so much into life. Like if we can live a life that is not siloed into separate boxes, but we're able to like move with our days, with our weeks, with our months, that is a real practice, a skill, something that we can do. You can do this. So there might be definitions that are holding you back or boxes that you thought you fit in. Like Akilah talks about, I'm the mother of a school-age child and what she thought that might mean. And now how living into her life, that definition that she is living has changed. So reclaim, look for that doorway, and create your own definitions. All right, hope you enjoyed this little bonus ending. Lots of love, love, love. Mwah.